Economist Richard Koo of the Nomura Research Institute recently stated in a talk that since the housing bubble crisis in China, he has received numerous calls from journalists, economists, investors, and even policymakers in Beijing. The familiar question is that, is China heading down the same path as Japan? Mr. Koo is a highly regarded global expert in economics and finance who has devoted his entire career to studying the consequences of the accumulation of excesses. During the U.S. economic recovery following the first Gulf War, which stalled in 1991, Richard Koo's former boss at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, financial expert Edward Friedel, began to worry about excessive debt and commercial real estate assets being used as collateral. Friedel argued that this contributed to a conservative economic and financial outlook, both among businesses and consumers. Consequently, there was weakened societal demand for credit as companies focused on restructuring their balance sheets. To describe this issue, Koo coined the term balance sheet recession. Koo later realized that Japan was facing a similar, if not more severe, problem. When the stock market bubble burst in 1989, stock prices plummeted by around 60% over the following 3 years. Real estate prices in Tokyo continued to decline for over a decade. Simultaneously, the economy slipped into deflation. Even the membership fees for golf clubs decreased by up to 94%. Many companies having borrowed to invest in real estate or purchase stakes in other firms found themselves unable to repay their debts as the value of their assets fell below their liabilities. However, the liquidity of these assets varied. Faced with the risk of insolvency or closure, many Japanese companies maximized their profits to prioritize debt repayment. In a normally functioning economy, corporations use capital provided by banks, households, or investors to conduct business. In Japan, during the aftermath of the bubble, things appeared quite different. Instead of raising capital, businesses began to hoard it for debt repayment and building up their own financial reserves. Trade deficits gradually turned into surpluses, hindering business expansion, affecting the overall economic vitality, and pushing society into a deflationary environment for nearly 2 decades. Is China following in Japan's footsteps? Currently, Chinese businesses are accumulating more debt relative to the country's GDP. Housing prices in China have begun to decline in recent months, and many real estate companies are experiencing financial imbalances. GDP growth and credit expansion have slowed down despite multiple interest rate cuts by the central bank. Businesses have reduced investment and are focusing on debt repayment. According to Mr. Koo, China has entered a balance sheet recession. A declining population and trade tensions with the United States are further dampening the economic outlook. However, whether the populous nation is on the same path as Japan or not is a complex question with no definitive answer. China's situation is somewhat more complicated. The majority of the debt burden in China is held by state-owned enterprises. These enterprises will continue to borrow and spend with the support of state-owned banks with the implicit approval of the policymakers in Beijing. Private enterprises, on the other hand, mostly hold debt concentrated in the real estate sector. These companies are trying to reduce their debt in various ways, such as cutting investments in new construction projects. Faced with declining real estate prices and weak market demand, even well-capitalized firms are taking similar measures. The end of the real estate boom in China partly reflects households having less money and becoming increasingly cautious in their spending. Recent statistics show that many households are trying to repay mortgage loans early out of fear that they won't be able to do so if interest rates remain high for an extended period. This has led to a slowdown in credit growth. The data also indicates that household debt is lower relative to the assets they own. In August 2023, the U.S. government imposed restrictions on businesses investing in critical and sensitive sectors of China, such as artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and quantum computing. Many experts believe that this decision, coming at a time when China's economy is facing difficulties, could exacerbate the situation and pose a more serious threat to the rise of the world's second-largest superpower. In July 2023, China's economy entered a period of inflation amidst declining personal consumption, reduced credit demand, decreased investment activity, and subdued business sentiment. The real estate sector is experiencing a free fall as many large companies face crisis. According to some statistics, real estate and related industries contribute up to 30% of China's total GDP, making it a crucial part of the Asian powerhouse economy. Increasing trade tensions combined with different monetary policies between the United States and China are putting significant pressure on the Chinese yuan. The U.S. Federal Reserve has been consistently raising interest rates, while the People's Bank of China has had to cut rates to rescue the economy. This has led to capital outflows and funds being transferred to U.S. banks, causing the value of the Chinese yuan to continuously depreciate against the USD. While a weaker yuan benefits exports, it poses challenges for Chinese companies when it comes to repaying debt in USD. Currently, a tough stance on China enjoys bipartisan support from both the Democratic and Republican parties in the United States. As the 2024 election heats up, both parties want to demonstrate their ability to better manage issues related to China, potentially leading to further trade restrictions with the populous nation. President Biden is currently leading the Republican candidates in terms of overall economic performance and in dealing with China specifically. However, the White House policy team must carefully consider whether China's economic issues will spill over globally. There is a possibility as capital exits the mainland, stock markets decline, and neighboring countries are affected. To thwart China's Made in China 2025 plan, former President Trump erected numerous trade barriers targeting Chinese businesses. President Biden has maintained these tariffs and shifted policy towards greater cooperation with allies to build domestic strength and counter China more effectively. An issue eroding China's economy is rising unemployment. When people are jobless and have no income, they cut spending, leading to further deflation. This could potentially push China into a lost decade, similar to Japan's in the past. Nobel laureate economist Professor Paul Krugman once noted that it's unclear how China will follow Japan's path, given the size and complexity of their economy. Additionally, the government's response has been relatively slow in implementing strong reforms to drive sustainable growth. He emphasized that major economies have all experienced debt crises: Japan in 1989, East and Southeast Asia in 1997, Russia in 1998, the United States in 2008, and Europe in 2010. There is a significant possibility that the next major economy to reach a Minsky moment is China. According to many economists, recent signals indicate that China has not yet entered a period of recession like Japan did. Mr. Koo also emphasized a significant difference between the two countries. When Japan faced a balance sheet recession, nobody knew the nature of the problem or had any ideas to solve it. Nowadays, Chinese policymakers are meticulously studying lessons from other countries, which sets them apart in their approach to addressing economic challenges. Mr. Koo's solution is relatively simple. If households and businesses are not borrowing to spend, even with low interest rates, then the government should do so. The government should offset the fiscal deficit somehow with the surplus financial positions of the private sector through spending. According to Mr. Koo, Chinese officials have been relatively slow to react so far. The fiscal deficit, including local government borrowings, has increased this year, making the risk of recession more imminent. The central government still has room to borrow and spend more, but it seems to be doing so reluctantly. Mr. Koo asserts that this is a policy that needs to change. The longer it's delayed, the higher the price to be paid later. This means that China's economic issue is not because the private sector wants to stabilize its financial situation, but rather because the central government is not willing to take bold steps. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.